I'm Jan Cherubin, and I'll be reading from my novel, The Orphan's Daughter, just out from the Sager Group. There are two narrators. One is Joanna Aronson, and the other narrator is Clyde Aronson, Joanna's father. I'm going to read in Joanna's voice now. 17-year locusts were raining down from the sky when I turned into the driveway and parked behind Brenda's Mazda. There was nothing to be afraid of, I told myself. The worst had already happened. My father had already died, and my stepmother had to be glad I was coming to help, although I didn't know how we were going to sort through all of my father's things over a weekend. Brenda was in the carport, laughing, watching me get out of the car, clawing at my clothes like a B-movie actress in a horror film. "You're scared of the cicadas," she said. "I'm not really," I said, and rather fearlessly, I thought, I plucked off an armor-backed insect that was clinging to my hair like a barrette. The dog barked behind the side gate. He was pacing frantically, swishing his tail swishing the mesh part of the fence. "Hoffman," I called. He put his paws on the fence rail, and I went over and hugged his shaggy neck. He wasn't named after Dustin Hoffman, as my sister Susan sometimes said, but for a friend of my father's from the orphanage. Brenda held the screen door open impatiently, so I let Hoffman lick my face, and then I went in. As soon as I crossed the threshold, I was sorry I had come alone. This was the kitchen where my father's vegetable soup used to simmer on the stove, where my mother made pancakes on Sunday mornings, where Susan and I stamped snow off our boots in winter and in summer stood dripping in our bathing suits, and where, once we were grown, my father greeted us when we came to visit, his arms open, a cigarette in his hand, and where, and everywhere, he would never greet us again. After dinner, I read in the living room while Brenda got ready for bed. She didn't want us going through my father's stuff until tomorrow. I put my book down and ran my hand over the round top of the three-legged table next to the sofa where I was sitting. The table's legs were carved to look like elephant trunks, which delighted me as a child. It had been an anniversary present, and my mother never failed to mention that it was hand-carried all the way from Delhi in 1947 by Eddie Zakian, a poet they knew when they lived in the village. Like a lot of things, my mother regretted not taking the table when she moved out of the house. "You want that table?" my stepmother said. I looked up. Brenda had been watching me idly trace my finger over the ivory Taj Mahal. "Yeah, I've always wanted this," I said. "My parents' friend brought it back from India." "I'm sorry to burst your bubble, Joanna," Brenda said, "but your parents' friend brought them a cheap piece of tourist junk." My mouth dropped open. I was startled by the hostility and also the truth of her remark. I had always thought the table was exotic and unique, but now that Brenda called the table cheap tourist junk, I easily pictured stacks of them at Pier 1. I drew my hand away from the tabletop. I'd learned only recently that elephants had to be killed for their ivory. I'd be better off denying any connection to the tainted piece of furniture, but I was loyal to the past. "It's not junk," I said. I'd have to force myself to get along with Brenda for the weekend until I collected my stuff. I still had art projects in the attic from high school. I decided I wasn't going to let her bother me. It was 90 degrees in the house and stifling, but she hadn't turned on the air conditioner. I wasn't saying a word. I'd survive. I had shorts on and a tank top, and besides, I liked having the windows open. The tropical atmosphere reminded me of the late 50s and early 60s when Cedar Drive was new and neighbors came outside after dinner to escape the heat. No one even owned an air conditioner then. Susan and I would dart from house to house with the other kids, catching lightning bugs while the adults brought chairs onto the front lawn and had coffee there, or on the square of concrete my mother and father jokingly referred to as the East Terrace. Through a neighbor's window, we could hear the roar of bathwater filling a tub, a screen door banging, and the voices of children younger than we were being put to bed. And then it was quiet. Nothing but the chirp of crickets and the reflective murmur of our parents' muted conversation. We were like prairie settlers in those early suburban days, our wagons drawn together until morning, when we woke and saw that it was light everywhere, newborn, tender as grass. In the morning, on the way to loading some of my things into the car, Brenda threw her menacing weight between me and the door. "You're not taking that table," Brenda said. "Why not?" I said. The three-legged table was light, and I held it aloft in the palm of my hand like a waiter carrying a tray. "You don't want it." "Nevertheless," said Brenda, "my late husband willed the house and its contents to me." She grabbed one of the elephant trunk legs. What was she planning to do, break it off like a breadstick? I tightened my arms around the table, but she was not letting go. We both knew she would win this particular battle. It was the judgment of Solomon. Brenda didn't care if the cheap piece of junk broke, and I did. And so, at least for the time being, I let go.